Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to interrupt. I want to welcome you to our VIP reception with Dr. Jordan Peterson. We're so glad to have you all with us. I'll just be brief. I do want to especially thank Don Sebastiani of Don Sebastiani and Sons for very generously donating the wines that we have tonight for the reception, and I hope you'll enjoy them. Dr. Peterson will be here momentarily to take photos for all those who are interested. Right afterward, we're going to have a Q&A session where you can personally ask questions with him and have a conversation. So please enjoy yourself, and thank you again for joining with us.
Thank you. So my question is related to an interview you did with Camille Paglia not long ago. Yeah. And you were referring to Robert Sapolsky's work about the zebras and how the lions don't go after the zebras because they're camouflaged into the herd, not to the landscape. Yeah. And Sapolsky would put a red dot on a haunch and the lions would then go after that zebra. And I get that, I believe that's true. But my question, how do the lions communicate with each other to go after the one zebra with the red dot?
Well, I think the answer to that is that lions are a lot smarter than we think they are. Yeah. Well, you think about it, hunting animals have to be very, very intelligent when they hunt in packs because they're obviously communicating with one another constantly, and they isolate an individual that's identifiable in some sense, and they seem to be able to determine, perhaps from its behavior, perhaps because of the behavior of the hunters, what that animal is. But I mean, to be a predator means to manifest substantial intelligence, and I don't think we understand it very well at all.
I agree. I think they're telepathic.
Well, animals are strange, you know how they can pick up your emotions. They're very good at decoding nonverbal behavior, and so they're communicating through their posture and so forth, but I don't think we understand it very well at all. So,
thank you.
You bet. Another question?
Dr. Peterson,
there we go.
College professor here in California. You said some things that are a little bit disheartening to me as an educator for our youth who are bringing them up into this new society and educating them to think deeply about what the meaning is for themselves as individuals. How do you see current academics as failing our students now?
Well, I really think the faculties of education should probably just be burned to the ground. They're failing them. They're failing, the faculties of education in particular are failing them in a variety of ways. The first is that I've seen no evidence coming from the faculties of education that our understanding of how to educate children more efficiently has progressed at all in the last 40 years. In fact, I think it's gone backwards. And a lot of the things the faculties of education had pushed, like self-esteem, which actually doesn't exist because it's measured improperly, like whole word learning, for example, like multiple intelligences, all these things have actually set the cause of education back substantially because they're not based on anything that's real. And then the introduction of this very complex gender education, to me, is nothing but ideology. It's being introduced to children who are far too young and who have enough confusion in their life without adding that additional dimension. But most importantly, I think that the education system, it doesn't teach kids to read well, it doesn't teach them to write well, it doesn't teach them to think about thinking so they can't think critically, and it does almost nothing to help them understand that they have a character that they could develop. And this has been true for a very long time, and there's historical reasons for it, but it'd be very good, to have it. What grade do you teach? College. College. Well, even with the college kids, no one's ever sat down with most of those kids and asked them, for example, to write an essay of any length and with any degree of seriousness on who they would like to be, and I don't mean career-wise, although that's part of it, and why, to justify that. It's an unbelievably useful exercise. And so, especially if you're in the humanities, your job is to teach the character development, and we just don't do that well. We tear everything apart and put nothing back together, and it's a terrible thing for young people. So that's that's some of the problems.
Hi, Dr. Peterson. Another education question. We have a daughter who's in 5th grade in San Francisco. She's in a private school because the public schools here are by and large abysmal. And they are, I recall hearing a lecture of yours where you said, as soon as the school starts teaching your kids things like equity, diversity, and inclusion, pull them out. And our daughter's school is deep and wide into that. And
Yeah.
there seems to be no escape. So
Yeah.
my husband and I agreed that we would do whatever you say tonight. So he said, his solution is that we just need to teach her our values, our individual value system at home. Well, I say, let's think about pulling her out. So what do you say?
How good are you at teaching her your individual values at home? Like, can you help her think it through? Is she confused by it?
She is confused by it, but she's mostly rebelling, and whenever I try to bring it up, she gets very angry.
And is she rebelling against your attempts to counter it, or what's she angry about?
She's angry because she loves her friends at her school. She's afraid of us pulling her out, and she's very defensive of her school.
Well, okay, so the first thing I would say is that I wouldn't give you advice because I don't know the particularities of your situation well enough. I think that given what you just told me, your attempts to provide her with the values that you can provide her with at home are probably her best long-term defense in any case. It isn't obvious to me that you're going to find a place where this isn't a problem. So, and she's in grade 5?
She is, and by the way, my husband keeps whispering, "I told you so," in my
Well, that's one of the prerogatives of being married, at least from time to time. So I think it's pretty, you could try the values move for a good while before you do anything more radical. You know, there's something to be said for minimal necessary force, and you don't want to set up any more rebellion on her part than is absolutely necessary. I don't know if that'll be sufficient, but hopefully it will.
It's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet, you bet.
Hi. As a student at this big university, it's hard to me to sometimes, I see the university like crumble like every day.
Yeah.
It's like in all this ideology, and I just find it hard to how do I keep myself like motivated or like finding meaningful to continue and like.
Well, your best bet in university is you at least have the chance to read. You know, and what you need to do is I have a list of books on my website, which you may know about or may not. You could go read all those books.
I've been reading all of them.
Good. Well, the thing is that the best thing you can do if you're inundated by foolish teaching is to go read all the books that people have thought are great, because lots of them are great. And then you can make your peer group the people who wrote those books. And hopefully that'll be enough so that you'll be a lot more than you were. And that'd be something. But you have the opportunity to do that, even if you're not encouraged to do it. You can do the reading. And I don't know of any better that, and I would also say to write, write. Read something great, write about it. Get your thoughts in order. That'll help straighten you out. And you might as well read the best since it's there and it's free, which is also something quite remarkable. I don't know anything better than that. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Dr. Peterson, a lot of what you say really resonates with me, and so I listen to it quite a bit. But sometimes I feel as though you take the position that these people who are concerned about sexism, racism, and other kinds of discrimination are a bunch of whiners. And I wonder what you really feel about that and how you would address that issue.
Oh, I think it's true. It's not that I don't think that there are forms of arbitrary prejudice that are counterproductive. Obviously, that's the case, and I think that that's detrimental to everyone. It would be wonderful to build a society where people were invited and encouraged to participate based on their level of skill in relationship to the required tasks, right? That's what we'd want. And there are arbitrary barriers, but the victim culture that's been generated on the university campuses is not only unwarranted in my estimation, given how much better things are, say, in the United States on the sexism and racism front than, say, 50 years ago or 40 years ago or 30 years ago or 20 years ago. There's been unbelievable improvement. And not only that, the emphasis on microaggressions and safe spaces and interference with freedom of speech are definitely making students less resilient rather than more resilient. I mean, every psychotherapist worth his salt knows that, because the way that you help people overcome their anxieties is by exposing them voluntarily to things that they're afraid of and are disgusted by. And it's the core, apart from getting your story straight, it's actually the core of all successful psychotherapies. And so by protecting students, there isn't anything you can do that would make them less resilient than what's being done in the universities. And Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff, in their book, Coddling of the American Mind, laid that out pretty nicely. The American Psychological Association and the American Psychiatric Association should have put out statements in this regard years ago, because everyone knows, if they're trained properly, that this is just not how you go about doing it. That doesn't mean that if you're concerned with arbitrary discrimination, that somehow makes you whiny. Like, I don't believe that, because discrimination is real and it's pointless, it's harmful.
So how do we address it?
How do we address it?
As a society?
Well, I think we are addressing it, first of all, because we're much less prejudiced than we were like at any other point in known history. So that's the first thing, is that things have improved at a rate that's so dramatic that it's almost unbelievable. But the way I think that we improve it is that we crush it out inside our individual souls. You know, for me, that's why I concentrate on the individual. Organizing ourselves into tribes and making that our paramount identity, and then teaching students that the appropriate way to view history is as the battleground between identity groups, is just a reversion to tribalism. And that's like, whenever a society reverts to tribalism, all that happens is that violence breaks out. Obviously, because tribal groups are violent, and if you can't speak between your tribes because they're so clearly demarcated, and there's no communication, all there's left is violence. And so I just don't see that as, I mean, even if the people, let's give 50% of the people who are complaining about discrimination their due as people who are genuinely concerned. Their solution is inappropriate. All it's going to do is cause more trouble. And the idea that, you know, there shouldn't be a uniting narrative, I think that's completely absurd, because it's a uniting, we're all here and we're all peaceful at the moment, despite all our pathologies, because there's a uniting narrative. Everyone knows what they're doing here. And so everyone acts in a manner that allows everyone to predict each other. And that's why we're peaceful, because we're all half crazy, you know, and there's lots of times we're not peaceful. You need those uniting narratives, and they have to be superordinate to the group identity. And
we all look inside ourselves, every single one. Society should say, everybody, look at yourself carefully and see if you're doing discrimination. And if you are being discriminatory, stop it.
Yeah, well, that's it. And it's not just discriminatory. I'm sure that, you know, my sense is that the average person, myself included, has more than enough sins on their conscience to keep themselves busy polishing themselves up for the rest of their life. And so I think that's a really good place to start, because, you know, you take the damn responsibility on yourself. And if you're looking outside for someone to blame, then that's the first sign that there's probably something wrong. And it's not like I don't know that some people have it rough. Some people have it rough, and it's because of external things that have happened to them. But their best bet still is to take the responsibility for fixing that onto themselves. And you weaken people if you say that they're the passive victim of external forces. And then they become the passive victims of external forces. And it's not good. So, yeah.
Is there a generational divide in the themes of the questions that you get, and which ones do you find the most entertaining?
I don't really think there is a generational divide particularly. I haven't noticed it. Most entertaining, God, that's a tough one. I mean, yeah. Look, I mean, I wouldn't say that what I've been doing for the last 3 years has been fun, but it's been unbelievably worthwhile and meaningful. You know, like it's definitely been. I've continued to do it because I can't think of anything better to do than to come to an event like this and to talk seriously to people about issues that I hope are fundamental. And the evidence seems to be that it, as far as I can tell, that it's doing a substantial number of people a substantial amount of good. And so that's not fun precisely, but it's better than fun. But I can tell you one thing that, well, this is how it's better than fun in some sense. You know, I mentioned this in my talk tonight. It's very affecting to travel all over the world and to have people that I don't know come up to me constantly. Like, if I was outside during a day, it would happen 50 times, and say, look, I was having a hell of a time, and here's why. And here's the things I've done to change, and it's way better. And, you know, there isn't anything you could hope for that would be better in your life than to be able to travel to places you've never been, everywhere, and for perfect strangers to come up to you on the street politely and tell you that their lives are much better than they were, and that it was because of paying some attention to what I've been communicating. Not originating, but communicating. So that's a great thing, and as long as that continues, then I'll continue doing this, and I'll be content with whatever fun I manage to extract from the process. So So we'll just do one more, because I'm starting to not be very coherent, and so that's always a good place to stop. So who's got the mic?
I got the mic. If Logos speaks habitable order into chaos, and we reflect that by speaking truth, and that's good, then when we fail to speak truth, is that evil, and how is it differentiated from the original chaos that was being spoken to?
Well, it's definite. I would say yes, that it's evil, that's the right way of thinking about it. The initial chaos is more pluripotential. Like it has the alternatives of going many ways. Like I've dealt with families, say, in my clinical practice who've practiced many generations of deep lies. And so there's a potential there, right, that the lies generated, but it's almost impossible to set it straight. Like once you cast something like that into being, it's much more difficult to turn to the good. You know, it's obvious. You know, you think, oh, this is the day I'm finally going to tell off my boss. And it's like maybe you should have had an intelligent conversation with him at a slightly lower voice tone 3 years ago. You know, and so it's a little late. And you go there and you sacrifice your job because you can no longer control your anger, and now you're unemployed. And you don't have a good employment record for your next job, and now your family doesn't have anything to rely on. It's like, that's chaos, man, but it's not easy to set straight. Whereas normally, as long as you haven't done anything too pathological, what opens up in front of you is paths that could go in either direction. You know, it's not that hard to set it straight. But once you've made the mistake, well, you have to fix the mistake, and then you have to recast the potential, and that's hard. It requires, you have to admit that you did something wrong. You have to have the humility to note that you're the one in error. You have to calculate the strategy for setting it right. You have to implement it, and then you have to decide you're not going to do it again. Right? That's the full. What do you call that? When you go to Catholic Church and you confess, you have to confess, and you have to repent. And you have to atone. And that's what you do to eradicate evil, is you confess and you repent and you atone. And to atone that's at one, right? To restore that initial unity. It's very, very difficult. And the more things like that you pile up around yourself, the lower the probability that you'll straighten it out. So that's how it's different. Yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Very nice to be here tonight.